Okay, picture this. You pick up your phone, just, checking one single notification. You just want to see who liked your post, maybe check what that text said, and then, bam, 30 minutes later, you're literally watching a war unfold in a country you've barely even heard of, or you're reading up on some incredibly rare disease that obviously you're suddenly convinced you have, or you're fiercely arguing with total strangers in a random comment section. Like, what just happened? You didn't plan to be here, you didn't even want to be here, but you just couldn't stop. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to expose exactly what is happening inside your brain when you fall into this totally chaotic cycle. And, way more importantly, we're going to talk about how to finally get out of it.
So why can't you stop scrolling? I mean, if you've ever caught yourself just endlessly swiping through bad news, feeling worse and worse with literally every flick of your thumb, but completely unable to just pull yourself away, you know exactly how frustrating this is. It really feels like you're trapped, right? Well, in this explainer, we are going to reveal the invisible cell that you're currently trapped in. And I promise you, by the time we wrap this up, you'll understand exactly why your brain is hardwired for this exact behavior. Plus, you'll have the exact keys to finally unlock that door.
Look, we've all lived this scenario. It's midnight, you're completely exhausted, you should definitely be sleeping, but there's that glowing screen. You tell yourself, okay, just one more post, but then the algorithm feeds you another disaster, another controversy, another massive outrage, and suddenly your heart rate is spiking, your mind is just racing with all the world's problems, and sleep? Yeah, sleep is a distant memory. You are officially deep in the digital abyss. But seriously, how does a simple little piece of glass and plastic have this much power over our minds?
Well, it starts with part 1, the trap. Biology meets the algorithm.
So the absolute foundation of this trap is something called negativity bias. See, it turns out your brain did not evolve in the age of smartphones and Wi-Fi. Actually, it evolved in the wild, where danger was immediate and, lethal. For your ancient ancestors, if they heard a rustle in the grass, just ignoring it could literally mean getting eaten by a lion. So the humans who paid intense attention to potential bad news, they survived. The ones who just shrugged it off, they didn't. Basically, you are the direct descendant of the most anxious, hyper-vigilant humans who ever walked the earth. Bad news activates way more neural activity, and it sticks in your memory longer, simply because your brain's ancient alarm system thinks it's saving your life. Today, obviously, there's no lion in the grass, but your survival instincts are actively being hijacked by the infinite scroll.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it shatters a massive myth, the dopamine illusion. We are almost always taught that dopamine is the pleasure chemical, right? But in reality, it's actually the seeking chemical. Dopamine isn't released when you get what you want. It's released when you expect you might get something. So every single time you flick your thumb to scroll down, your brain whispers, hey, maybe the next post will be something shocking, something you absolutely need to know to survive. So you swipe. Nothing. You swipe again. Boom, another spike of dopamine. This creates a variable reward loop, which is exactly how a slot machine works. The biological reward isn't the content itself, the reward is the search. And social media algorithms, they are literally A/B testing thousands of variations of fear and outrage just to keep the specific seeking loop running. It's not necessarily evil, it's just math targeting your underlying biology.
And honestly, that is exactly why you shouldn't beat yourself up. It's a trap designed at the biological level. Feeling stuck in a doom-scrolling loop is not a moral failure. It really isn't a lack of character or willpower. It is simply your ancient brain doing exactly what it was built to do, just in a digital world it was never, ever built to handle. And honestly, really understanding this is our rock-bottom turning point for this whole explainer. You aren't weak. You're just totally outmatched by the environment. But the good news is, we can actually change that.
Which brings us to part 2, the toll, what it does to your mind.
Because the costs of this trap are incredibly severe. First off, you've got constant low-level anxiety. When you're consuming endless threat-based content, your nervous system just stays on high alert. Your brain physically cannot tell the difference between reading about a disaster and actually being in one. Second is sleep disruption. All that midnight scrolling floods your brain with blue light and the stress hormone cortisol, which makes deep, restorative sleep pretty much impossible. Third, and honestly perhaps the most dangerous, is learned helplessness. When you absorb massive, heavy amounts of bad news that you can do absolutely nothing about, your brain starts to believe that nothing you do matters at all, which, by the way, is a core psychological root of depression. And finally, exhaustive decision fatigue. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of your brain, just gets completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information. So you are left completely mentally drained, yet entirely unable to stop swiping.
All right, let's slow down and shift gears to part 3, the escape plan, building better habits.
So let's take a deep breath. We know the trap, we know the toll it takes. Now this is where you take your power back. Here is your literal map out of the digital abyss. We've got 4 meticulously structured steps to break the cycle and really reclaim control over your digital life. We are going to go through these one by one, because actually applying these practically, that's exactly what separates the people who stay trapped from the people who break free.
Okay, step 1 is devastatingly simple but incredibly powerful. Name it. The very second you realize you're falling into that infinite scroll, I want you to say this exact phrase out loud. I am doom scrolling right now. Now, why say it out loud? Well, because speaking literally requires you to engage your prefrontal cortex. It forces the rational part of your brain to wake up and interrupt that primal, emotional part of your brain that is currently driving the scroll. It gives you this incredibly crucial split second of conscious control.
Then we move to step 2, which comes down to this magic number, 15. Schedule it. Look, you don't have to completely cut yourself off from the world entirely, but you absolutely must create boundaries. Give yourself 2 15-minute windows per day to catch up on the news, maybe once in the morning, once in the evening. Outside of those 2 windows, you close the apps. By scheduling this, you are actively teaching your brain that the information will still be there later. It literally trains your nervous system to stop treating every single idle moment as a life or death threat monitoring opportunity. Now, the real crux of this whole thing is step 3. You cannot just simply stop a bad habit. Human psychology just doesn't work that way. You have to replace the loop. When that intense biological urge to pull out your phone and scroll hits you, you must replace it with a constructive 3-minute action. Take 3 deep breaths to reset your nervous system. Go for a quick 5-minute walk just to physically change your environment, or even just write down one single thing you were grateful for. What you're doing here is actually profound. You are training your brain to seek its dopamine release from constructive, positive actions instead of from fear-based, negative content. You're totally rewiring that seeking mechanism.
And that brings us to step 4. The absolute ultimate safeguard, designing your environment. We rely way too much on willpower, but willpower is a limited resource. By 10 p.m., your willpower is completely drained, which is exactly why you end up doom scrolling in the dark. Your environment, however, not limited. Your brain is always strongest when temptation is simply physically absent. So remove the worst social media apps off your home screen. Make them super hard to find. Or better yet, put your phone in an entirely different room when you go to sleep. Please do not rely on your totally exhausted willpower to fight billion-dollar algorithms. Instead, rely on a design environment where the bad habit is practically impossible to even execute.
So, we've reached the end. You now know exactly what doom scrolling really is. You know how negativity bias and variable dopamine rewards completely hijack your primal survival instincts. And you have a solid 4-step action plan to name it, schedule it, replace the loop, and design your environment. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. You have the knowledge now. You can clearly see the invisible cell. And the door? It's unlocked. The explainer is over. So, will you put your phone down now? Reset your mind? Reclaim your life? See you next time.